Hello, my Kwababa family. Welcome back to another episode breakdown, and honestly, guys, today's episode did not disappoint. If you thought last week was heavy, buckle up, because things between Zwelakhe and Kwababa finally boiled over, and I don't think this family is walking away from this one unscathed. Let's get into it. We open with the household still reeling from the paternity storyline that has kept us all on the edge of our seats for weeks now. For anyone just joining us, the short version is this: Zwelakhe has spent his whole life believing he is a Mackay's, only to have that identity quietly unravel piece by piece. His mother, Zwelakhe, has known the truth for years and chose silence over honesty, and that silence is exactly what's now tearing this family apart. Today's episode picks up right where we left off, with the fallout from the DNA results still fresh and everyone in the house tiptoeing around Zwelakhe like he might shatter at any moment. From the opening scene, you can tell the mood in the house has shifted completely. Where there used to be warmth between the brothers, there is now this thick, uncomfortable silence whenever they're in the same room. Zwelakhe barely looks at anyone. He's been carrying so much these past few weeks, first the suspicion, then the Sangoma's cryptic warnings about his ancestors calling him by another name, and now the confirmation that the man he called father his whole life shares no blood with him at all. That's a lot for anyone to process, and honestly, I think a lot of us watching have been waiting for him to crack. And crack he does. The scene that everyone is going to be talking about tonight happens in the kitchen, of all places. It starts small. Kwababa makes an offhand comment, something about Zwelakhe acting like he's the only one who's ever had a hard life, and you can just see something shift in Zwelakhe's face. It's the kind of comment that wouldn't have meant much a month ago, but timing is everything, and this was absolutely the wrong moment to say something like that to a man who has just had his entire sense of self pulled out from under him. Zwelakhe doesn't respond right away. That's actually what makes the scene so tense. He just stands there for a few seconds, jaw tight, and you as a viewer are just waiting for the explosion. And then it comes. He accuses Kwababa of never once checking on him through this whole ordeal, of caring more about protecting their father's secrets than about his own brother's pain. Kwababa, to his credit, tries to de-escalate at first, but he's never been the type to back down from a fight, and within seconds the two of them are shouting over each other, years of unspoken resentment spilling out all at once. It's when Kwababa brings up Zwelakhe, accusing Zwelakhe of taking his anger out on the wrong people when the real problem is his mother's years of lying, that things go completely physical. Zwelakhe shoves him first. Kwababa, stunned for half a second, shoves back harder, and then it's a full-blown scuffle, plates crashing off the counter, a chair knocked over, both of them shouting things they clearly don't mean but can take back once they're out. It takes their uncle bursting into the kitchen and physically pulling them apart to stop it from getting worse. Even then, Zwelakhe is still shouting, pointing at Kwababa, telling him he's tired of being treated like an outsider in his own home. What makes this scene land so hard is the direction. The camera doesn't cut away quickly the way these fight scenes sometimes do. It lingers on Zwelakhe's face afterward, and you can see the exact moment the adrenaline fades and shame rushes in to replace it. He looks at his hands like he doesn't recognize them. He looks at Kwababa's split lip and just walks out without another word. That silence after the storm is honestly more powerful than the fight itself. The rest of the family doesn't take this well, understandably. Zwelakhe is beside herself with guilt, and rightfully so. This entire crisis traces back to her decision to keep the truth buried for as long as she did. We get a quiet, heartbreaking scene later in the episode where she sits alone in her room, replaying the moment she could have told Zwelakhe the truth years ago, back when it might have been easier for him to hear. Instead, he had to go digging for it himself, had to push for a DNA test against everyone's wishes, had to find out in the coldest, most clinical way possible that the man raising him and the man who fathered him are not the same person. Meanwhile, word of the fight spreads through the household fast, and it reopens old wounds nobody was ready to deal with. Their father figure, the man Zwelakhe grew up calling Baba, is shown watching the aftermath from a distance, and honestly, his expression says everything. There's guilt there too, because everyone around Zwelakhe has known some version of the truth for longer than he has, and that kind of collective secrecy has a way of curdling into shame once it's exposed. Now let's talk about Mlobo for a second, because I don't think he's entirely the villain here, even though he threw the first real insult. Mlobo has been under his own kind of pressure this season, especially with the ongoing tension around his father's business dealings and the documents he's been trying to get his hands on. We saw him a few episodes back nearly getting caught snooping through his father's things, trying to piece together what's really going on with the family's affairs, and that stress hasn't gone away. If anything, it's been simmering right alongside Zwelakhe's identity crisis, and today's fight feels like two brothers who are both drowning and neither one has the bandwidth left to hold the other up. There's a brief scene after the fight where Mlobo, nursing his split lip, talks to one of the family elders about what happened. He doesn't try to justify what he said, but he does admit that he's been feeling invisible in his own family for a while now, like all the attention, all the sympathy, all the drama has been centered on Zwelakhe's paternity story, and nobody has stopped to ask how the rest of them are holding up. It's a surprisingly vulnerable moment from a character we don't usually see show that side of himself, and it adds some much-needed nuance to what could have easily been a straightforward good brother versus bad brother storyline. Elsewhere in the episode, we check back in on the wedding planning that's been dragging on in the background of all this chaos. Given everything happening with Zwelakhe, it's honestly hard to imagine the wedding moving forward on schedule, and the episode doesn't shy away from addressing that. There's a tense conversation between the bride's family and Zwelakhe's relatives about whether it's even appropriate to continue with the celebrations while the household is in this state. Some family members argue that pushing forward with joy is exactly what the family needs right now, a distraction from the heaviness. Others feel it would be disrespectful to celebrate while Zwelakhe is clearly struggling. No decision is made by the end of the episode, but the seeds of yet another family disagreement are clearly being planted. We also get an update on the ongoing tension between Mlobo and his father over those mysterious documents. Earlier in the season, Mlobo was caught nearly red-handed searching through his father's belongings, convinced that there's something being hidden from him about the family's business and, by extension, his own inheritance and future. Today's episode gives us a small but important clue, a brief shot of an unopened envelope sitting on his father's desk, addressed in handwriting we don't recognize. The camera holds on it just a bit too long for it to be a coincidence, which tells me the writers are setting up another reveal in the coming weeks. Knowing this show, that envelope is probably going to blow up an entirely different corner of the family's secrets. There's also a quieter subplot developing around the Sangoma's earlier warnings. If you remember, Zwelakhe was told that his ancestors have been trying to reach him under a different name, hinting strongly that his paternal lineage was never what he believed it to be. Today, we see him revisiting that conversation in his memory during a quiet moment alone after the fight. It's clear the spiritual weight of this revelation is sitting on him just as heavily as the emotional and social fallout. There's a genuinely moving shot of him standing outside at night, looking up like he's trying to figure out which ancestors are actually his to call on now. It's a small moment, but it says a lot about how this show handles identity, not just as a legal or biological question, but as something deeply spiritual too. By the episode's final act, tensions in the house have cooled slightly, but nothing is resolved. Zwelakhe returns home late, avoiding eye contact with everyone, and retreats to his room without eating dinner. Mlobo, for his part, sits outside with a bag of ice pressed to his lip, staring off into the distance, clearly replaying the fight in his head and probably regretting at least some of what he said. Their mother figures hover nervously nearby, unsure whether to intervene or give the brothers space, which honestly mirrors how a lot of us as viewers are feeling right now too. Do we want them to talk it out immediately, or do we think they both need time to sit with what just happened first? The episode closes on a genuinely unsettling note. We cut to a scene of the extended family gathering to discuss what to do next, and there's open disagreement about how to handle Zwelakhe going forward. Some relatives think he needs space and time to grieve the version of his life he thought he had. Others think coddling him will only make things worse and that he needs to be held accountable for putting his hands on his brother, regardless of the emotional context. Watching these two positions clash sets up what feels like the real conflict of the coming weeks, not just Zwelakhe versus Mloba, but the whole family trying to figure out how to hold both compassion and consequences at the same time. Honestly, guys, this episode did a great job of reminding us that grief doesn't always look like crying in a corner. Sometimes it looks like snapping at the person closest to you because they happen to be standing there when everything finally becomes too much. Zwelakhe's storyline has been one of the strongest arcs this show has done in a while, precisely because it doesn't rush the emotional beats. We've watched this identity crisis build slowly, layer by layer, from suspicion to confirmation to full-blown family rupture, and today's fight feels like the natural, if painful, culmination of everything he's been holding in. I also want to give credit to how the show is handling Mloba here. It would have been easy to write him as simply the antagonist in this scene, the guy who said the wrong thing at the wrong time and started a fight. But by giving him that scene afterward, admitting his own feelings of being overlooked, the writers are clearly setting up a more complicated redemption arc for him rather than just painting him as the bad brother. I have a feeling we're going to see him try to make amends in the coming episodes, possibly by helping Zwelakhe process everything he's going through, once his own pride lets him get there. Looking ahead, there are a few big questions I'm sitting with after this episode. First, will the wedding actually go ahead as planned, or is this the storyline that finally derails it for good? Second, what's in that envelope on the father's desk, and how badly is it going to complicate the already fragile peace in this household? And third, how is Zwelakhe going to rebuild his relationship not just with Mloba, but with the idea of who his family even is now that the foundation he built his identity on has shifted under his feet? One thing is for sure, Kwababa is not letting up on the drama, and if today's episode is any indication, we are nowhere near a resolution. If anything, this fight between Zwelakhe and Mloba feels like it's cracked something open that the whole family is going to have to deal with, whether they're ready to or not. That's it for today's review, guys. Let me know in the comments whether you think Zwelakhe was justified in losing his temper, or whether you're firmly on Team Mloba after that kitchen scene. And as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss next week's breakdown, because from the looks of that final family meeting, things are only getting messier from here. See you in the next one.